Which elements of the operational response surrounding Charlie Kirk's assassination align with known intelligence playbooks? And what can we responsibly say about those similarities without turning pattern into proof? The settled facts remain the public record. Charlie Kirk was shot while speaking at Utah Valley University. A bolt action rifle was recovered and a suspect arrested in the days following the attack. Federal and local agencies moved quickly to collect evidence, share grainy images, and brief the public. Candace Owens, amongst many others, publicly raised questions not only about the gaps in footage, but also about Erica Kirk's leadership at Turning Point USA, suggesting that the new CEO may have leaned too heavily on emotional appeals, possibly unable to manage the organization during such an intense period. Candace implied that Erica's constant public appearances could have been a mistake, proposing that personal time to grieve may have been more prudent. These observations underscore the public's role in testing narratives. They highlight structural concerns in leadership decisions and messaging, not proof of conspiratorial intent. Other commentators emphasize the need for transparency and caution in drawing conclusions, which aligns with the intelligence practice of cataloging behaviors and structural responses without leaping to judgment. From a kingdom perspective, discernment requires patience and wisdom. Scripture instructs believers to test claims carefully, seek understanding, and avoid being swept up by simplified stories. Candace's commentary on leadership and narrative control demonstrates that evaluating human choices in the aftermath of trauma can coexist with measured skepticism, not cynicism. Public scrutiny in this frame is an analytical tool. It helps track who is making decisions, why, and what vulnerabilities appear when institutions or leaders face extreme pressure. Intelligence experts have noticed certain ways people try to shape public opinion without taking direct responsibility. These include distracting attention, calling an attack the work of a lone person, letting minor players fade out, controlling the story, and using others to spread a message. In Charlie Kirk's case, some of these patterns showed up. News and statements moved fast. The lone actor label appeared clearly, and official messages were coordinated. At the same time, Erica Kirk spoke out against those celebrating her husband's death, calling it sick and showing the real emotional impact of what was happening online. Her response reminds us that grief collides with public attention and messaging, intentional or not, and can put huge pressure on people. Experts studying covert operations note that distraction and framing often exploit these moments, steering attention away from important questions. That doesn't prove anything was secretly coordinated, but it shows similar patterns. Candace Owens asking questions in this context is a careful pushback against oversimplifying a complicated situation. From a biblical perspective, believers are taught to stay clear headed and not get caught up in side battles. It also explains why Candace's concern about leadership and messaging makes sense. The way information is handled affects perception, whether intentional or not. Calling an event the act of a lone actor is something authorities do often to stabilize public emotion and simplify complex situations. In Charlie Kirk's case, early news reports quickly identified a single suspect who was arrested shortly after. This approach is common around the world because it allows law enforcement to communicate that immediate danger has been contained while investigations continue. Labeling someone as a lone actor does not automatically explain motive or connections or wider influences. It is a starting point for investigation, not a final judgment. Intelligence and law enforcement professionals have observed this pattern repeatedly. In high profile incidents, presenting a simple narrative helps prevent panic and keeps public messaging coherent, while deeper analysis is still ongoing. At the same time, public reactions and media commentary may complicate matters. In the aftermath of Charlie's assassination, the conservative media environment fractured. MAGA influencers and commentators disagreed on explanations, motives, and leadership decisions. Criticism and personal attacks circulated quickly, adding noise to the story. Rapid dissemination and amplification of different interpretations resemble patterns intelligence analysts have identified in public communication following crises. These patterns do not automatically imply that anyone is secretly orchestrating events, but they do show how information can move in predictable ways. Candace Owens' insistence on clarity and questioning leadership decisions demonstrates a cautious approach. She focused on evidence and understanding rather than reacting emotionally to narratives as they developed. From a kingdom perspective, believers are called to remain calm, to pursue truth, and avoid being swept into partisan disputes over oversimplified stories. Observing how messages move, how narratives form, and who amplifies which part of a story allows people to analyze events responsibly. The split in the conservative media landscape illustrates the speed at which public perception can be shaped and why tracking messaging patterns is necessary for understanding the structural dynamics at work. Studying these patterns does not require jumping to conclusions about secret motives. Instead, it encourages patience, careful attention to facts, and discernment. Discarded middleman and narrative containment are two more recurring techniques that analysts watch for in investigations and intelligence operations. Discarded middlemen are minor figures who appear important early in a situation but fade from the narrative once their role is no longer needed. Narrative containment refers to how official statements and controlled messaging shape the public discussion, limiting speculation and focusing attention. In Charlie's case, some of these dynamics were visible. For example, TPUSA leadership decided to proceed with a live stream without involving Candace Owens, which highlighted internal distrust and friction. Meanwhile, external figures made threats or issued statements that amplified the discussion, drawing attention to the divisions within the community. These actions did not prove any hidden orchestration, but they did illustrate how public messaging ecosystems can create confusion, can influence perception, and shift focus away from the central facts of the investigation. Analysts studying intelligence and information operations track these behaviors carefully. Who participates, who is excluded, what statements gain traction, and how narratives evolve over time. The goal is not to assign blame, but to understand patterns. Candace Owens' insistence on questioning events and leadership decisions provides a clear example of how individuals can navigate complex, rapidly evolving situations responsibly. From a kingdom perspective, believers are reminded to test claims, to focus on verified information, and to avoid sensationalism. Observing patterns of message amplification, containment, and exclusion equips people to remain steady during high profile events. It helps you interpret developments thoughtfully and resist rumors. By understanding these rhythms, the public and believers in particular can respond to information with clarity and integrity, maintaining attention on the truth while avoiding unnecessary distraction or fear. The disciplined approach mirrors how intelligence professionals assess incidents without assuming hidden intentions, relying instead on structural observation and critical thinking. Misdirection is one of the key techniques analysts observe when examining high profile events. It involves focusing public attention on secondary issues or narratives, often before central facts are fully known. Historically, intelligence agencies and law enforcement have used misdirection to prevent confusion, protect sensitive sources, or maintain operational scrutiny. In Charlie's case, public conversations quickly centered on cultural tensions, on ideological divides, and online radicalization. These discussions were real and important in society, but the speed with which they dominated the conversation drew attention away from the basic facts about the attack itself. This is the type of structural pattern analysts notice. The way attention moves can be manipulated or intentionally or simply emerges from social dynamics. But either way, it shapes perception. Observers like Candace Owens emphasize the need to maintain focus on verified evidence, requesting more footage and questioning early conclusions, which reflects a disciplined approach to staying grounded amid distraction. From a kingdom perspective, believers are instructed to keep their minds focused on what is true and essential rather than being caught up in secondary debates. Emotional reactions, social media amplification, and early narrative framing can all contribute to a sense of urgency that makes people overlook the central facts. Recognizing the pattern of misdirection helps the public understand how narratives form and spread, and why resisting premature closure is important. Even in the midst of grief or political turmoil, maintaining attention on the verified facts allows people to analyze events responsibly. The public outcry, the commentary, and social conversation demonstrate how misdirection functions naturally in society, showing why patience and careful evaluation are essential for anyone trying to understand high impact events like Charlie Kirk's assassination. Proxy amplification is another key pattern where aligned commentators, media personalities, or external accounts spread messages without appearing directly involved in the original event. Analysts have seen this repeatedly in election interference, influence operations, and high profile investigations. In Charlie's case, both domestic and foreign voices quickly injected pre existing narratives into public discussion, emphasizing social tension, political division, or institutional trust issues. This amplification does not confirm any coordinated secret plan, but it does affect perception and makes it more challenging for the public to focus on verified facts. Candace Owens' insistence on transparency and a request for additional footage are examples of countering amplification with careful attention to evidence. She encourages documenting inconsistencies, asking questions patiently, and resisting the pressure to accept simple explanations. From a kingdom perspective, believers are called to anchor themselves in truth, not emotion or unpopular opinion. Observing proxy amplification and understanding its effects equips people to maintain clarity, to recognize patterns, and distinguish between structural behaviors and speculative conclusions. When applied thoughtfully, this approach helps the public respond responsibly to high impact events, track the evolution of narratives, and maintain discernment. Studying these rhythms allows people to protect themselves from being manipulated by social amplification while keeping attention on the facts and truth as they emerge. The events following Charlie Kirk's assassination illustrate how quickly public perception, organizational response, and media amplification interact in ways that mirror historical operational playbooks. Candace Owens' questioning of Erica Kirk's leadership at TPUSA highlights this dynamic. Candace suggested that Erica relied heavily on emotional appeals, possibly unable to manage the organization during a period of intense public scrutiny, and implied that stepping back personally might have been wiser than taking a highly visible public role. This critique aligns with a broader theme of structural influence. Decisions about visibility, messaging, and leadership during crisis shape public understanding and can amplify confusion or division. At the same time, external pressures compound the complexity. Far-right commentator Nick Fuentes threatened Candace if a TPUSA livestream failed, illustrating personal clashes and further fracturing in the conservative media ecosystem. A broader feud among MAGA influencers emerged, filled with competing theories, attacks, and disputes, mirroring patterns seen in intelligence assessments where proxy voices amplify confusion and shape public sentiment. Even indications of surveillance, such as Candace's reporting on Egyptian aircraft tracking Erica Kirk, highlight how international or external factors can feed into domestic narrative dynamics. These developments connect directly to the operational parallels explored throughout the episode. Decisions about who is included, who is excluded, and how messages are framed function as structural levers of influence, similar to misdirection, narrative containment, and proxy amplification in intelligence literature. TPUSA's internal mismanagement, demonstrated by Blake Neff declining Candace's participation in the live stream, shows how sidelining voices can spark backlash and more scrutiny while simultaneously generating friction and speculation. Erica's public call for conspiracy theories to stop, while morally grounded, also reflects the tension between controlling narrative and allowing public attention to settle. A balancing act institutions have faced in crisis for decades. Ultimately, the post Charlie Kirk landscape reinforces the episode's central lesson. Operational patterns observed in intelligence work through misdirection, framing, amplification, and control of narratives can be mirrored in public, media, and organizational responses, even without covert orchestration. By observing these behaviors, believers and public alike can maintain discernment, track structural influence, and resist being swept by emotional or social pressures. I'll now close off today's episode with a reminder that truth emerges steadily when attention is careful, measured, and grounded in evidence, not in reaction to the noise that rapid messaging can generate.